right, let's face it, one of the most important part of woodworking is the part that we all hate, and that is sanding. If you mess up in the finish, then you got a bad project. So you can't skip it. This video, we're gonna do a deep dive, everything you need to know from like the beginner to taking it to the next level, the sanders I actually use, the big drum sander back there, and if you stick around to the end, I'll let you know a lot of little tools that are hard to find that have really helped me out big time. So let's go ahead and let's get into it. All right, let's start with the basics, and that is grit. What is grit? Well, sandpaper, sand on paper. You take 1 square inch of your sandpaper and you measure how many grains are on there. And that is your grit. So 80 grit means 80 grains of sand on that 1 square inch. 1,000 grit means 1,000. So the lower the number, the higher the abrasiveness of the grit. So if you start at 40 grit, you're talking some really rough stuff. If you go up to 220, you're getting into the finer end of woodworking. Now what you want to understand about grit is there's a reason why we have a lot of different grits. And that is that they all leave a scratch pattern. So let's say you start off with 80 grit and you're on a random orbital sander or you're hand sanding, these scratch patterns will be straight. Basically, you're making really big curlicues right here. And those are really deep, all right? I don't know how well you can see that. So essentially what you're doing is as you go through, you're making these bigger, rounder, deeper scratches. And then as you go from 80 grit to 100 grit to 120 grit, every time you change that, now you're getting a little bit smaller and finer scratches. But the trick is, and this is where everyone screws up, is you start with 80 grit, but you don't fully get all of those 80 grit scratches out, and then you don't catch it till you go to put finish on. So it's very important that you don't skip grits, and B, you go ahead and you sand thoroughly with each grit. What do I mean by that? You don't want to go from 80 to 220 and call it a day, because the 220, it doesn't matter how long you sand with it, is not going to take out all the big deep scratches with the 80 grit, okay? So we have grit completely out of the way. You know, you're up to speed, so you know what we're talking about the rest of the video. But this is important. This is where most people make mistakes, is typically jumping grits too much, or they get really frustrated because they try and start with 120 when they really need 80, and then they're standing there for hours and hours and hours. So you got to know what grit to use when. If you're sanding a paint finish, for instance, you want to start at 220, not 80, because that'll just take the paint right off, or clear coat, or whatever it is. So grit is really important. It's the foundation of everything in sanding. Now that we've got that away, let's get into the tech. Okay, if grit is the foundation of sanding, then it makes sense that the most important part of sanding is the sandpaper itself, the stuff that holds the grit. So what I use now is 3M Cubitron. What I used before this was the Diablo. The reason why is because it was a pretty good sandpaper. Also, it was pretty affordable, and it was available at Home Depot, so I could easily get it. The last thing I want to do is be out of sandpaper in the middle of a project, especially now that I've switched to this, because I have to order it from Amazon because I can't buy it locally. So what do I like about this 3M Cubitron? One is it lasts a long time. And essentially, I do this for a living. Maybe you just do this for a hobby and it's less important. But basically, when I'm using a sander, I'm buying my time back, okay? So the faster I can get through the process with it still looking professional, the better it is. So this kind of spending money on sandpaper, this stuff is dirt cheap compared to my time, because I could rather spend my time doing things that make me more money, right? So the cost of sandpaper really isn't a big deal to me. I do like the Cubitron a lot. These are the sanding nets. I like sanding nets a lot, and the reason why I do is because they work really well with dust collection. So whenever you hook a power sander up to dust collection, that's doing a couple of things. One is it's keeping the crap out of your lungs, and two is it's keeping the sandpaper from building, or the sand, it's keeping the sawdust from building up on your sandpaper. So essentially by hooking it to dust collection, you have more efficient, better sanding, and you're getting more life out of each sanding pad, right? Now you can use just regular sandpaper. They'll have holes in it for dust collection. I just tend to like these better. I think they do a better job. I know they're not quite as durable, but that brings me to the next point. Durability. One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is this is the definition of burning dollars to save pennies. They will stand there for so much longer just beating a poor piece of sandpaper to death. As soon as it stops sanding well, and you'll notice this, get rid of it. Don't spend an extra hour trying to milk a few more cents out of that sandpaper. I see it all the time. I did it a few times myself. So that's one of the key things. As far as sandpaper, I'm not going to make a lot of other recommendations because when I found what worked, I just stuck with it. But what I will tell you is this is not the place to save money. The stuff at Lowe's, I believe it's called Gator. I think it's terrible. I've used a lot of cheap brand sandpapers. It's not worth it. Spend the extra couple bucks. The trade-off is really there. There is another company that I use. Aren't you glad I'm so prepared? And it's called Serious Grit. And I started to buy them specifically for this detail sander, which we'll go over here in a minute. So far, it seems good enough. I've never used the 5-inch or 6-inch stuff, but this is a company that it seems relatively new, and they're making a lot of different sandpapers, especially for some of these specialty sanders. So that might be something to check out as well, but I'm not going to recommend their 5 or 6-inch disc just because I haven't used them. I'm only going to recommend things that I used. Okay, so there we go. We got sandpaper out of the way, but that is probably the biggest one that we're going to talk about today. So keep that in mind. Buy the good sandpaper. It's just like a drill. I would much rather have a Ryobi drill with DeWalt or Milwaukee bits than a DeWalt or Milwaukee drill with Ryobi bits. Like, the sandpaper really makes all the difference. It's just like a saw. It's only as good as how sharp its blade is. Sandpaper is important. That's why I said in the beginning of the video. There you go. I think I've hammered this home enough. Let's get on to like the slightly cooler stuff. Okay, so this one is something that I think people really like harp on way too much these days when it comes to tool selection. But in sanding, I think it's important, but there's a limit to it, and that is dust collection. Now, as I mentioned before, dust collection, it really helps the process of sanding. It's going to keep all of that stuff off of your material. You don't have to worry so much about it just sitting there getting ground into the surface. Your sandpaper is going to be more effective. It's going to last longer. Also, it's good for your lungs, okay? So, I've used a DeWalt dust extractor. I have never used the Festool or the Bosch or the Makita dust extractors or the Mirka. I've only used the DeWalt one. I've only used it a limited amount of time. But I think for just about every sander on the market, you can get by with just a shop vac. It's going to save you a ton of money, okay? But what you need to make sure you do is you need to make sure you put a bag in that shop vac. Otherwise, you're going to be cleaning the... You need to make sure you put a bag in that shop vac. Otherwise, you're going to be cleaning the filter out constantly, and then you're going to be breathing that crap in every time you clean the filter anyway, so it doesn't do any good for your time or for your lungs. So, shop vac with a bag. Now, this system right here, okay, this is what I've been using for years now. I get it on Amazon. I will put the name of it in the description. But essentially, you get all of these different fittings that attach to all of your different tools. I have them on miter saws, my track saw. I have them on all of my sanders, obviously. I have one specifically on my pocket hole jig. And basically, it just clicks in. There you go. You unsnap it. So basically, that means that just switching sanders, all I have to do is make one little click. It's not a big pain in the butt. Really, really a great thing to have. Now, also with dust collectors, you can get these little remotes that go to a switch, and you plug the switch into the wall, then you plug your plug into this, and you turn your dust collector on, and then all you got to do, hit a switch. Super handy. You don't want to spend, it's like 10 to 20 bucks, okay? I buy them like 5 at a time. Honestly, they usually last me about a year before they burn out, but they're so cheap I'd much rather just keep doing that. Milwaukee sells one for like $100 and some if you want to spend money on that. But yeah, so those are the basics of dust collection. You do not have to go crazy. You do not have to spend a fortune here. I got a rigid shop vac. You know, this is like 60 bucks for this hose setup, $10 for that. You know, bags, 20 bucks. Boom, there you go. You're in professional grade business without a lot of money. So don't splurge the money on the expensive dust extractors, things like that. I really don't think they're necessary for sanding. All right, let's talk about the sanders themselves, okay? And we're going to start with random orbit sanders. These are going to be your workhorses in your shop. And you have two options. You can go with a 5-inch or a 6-inch. I love the 6-inch random orbit sander. The issue is that you're going to have to order 6-inch paper. Very rarely. I think Home Depot carries some Diablo 6-inch, but Menards doesn't carry it to my knowledge. Lowe's definitely doesn't carry it. They all carry 5 inches. Now, It's only an inch difference. Does it really make up that much? Well, the difference between 5 inches and 6 inches, I mean, that's a lot. Some might even say too much. But actually that extra surface area, especially when you're sanding tabletops, things like that, big flat surfaces, it makes a huge difference just in the time spent. And again, we're buying back our time. We don't want to be standing there sanding unless we're psychos. So yeah, a 6 inch is definitely a good thing. But if you're just starting out, or you want to spend a little bit of money on a better sander, 5 inch is probably a good place to start. So right here you see I have the Festool ETS 125 REQ. I think I paid around $250 for this. And the truth is, I used the DeWalt random orbit sander. I think it's around 80 bucks. It's the one with the variable speed. I used that thing for like 4 or 5 years and beat the balls off of it. And the finish was just as good as this. The dust collection was slightly better with this, as it should be. And the vibration is much better with this. But if you're looking to not go out and buy Festool right out of the gate, I would really highly recommend that DeWalt. One sander that I didn't care for, at least back then, was the Milwaukee. But I think that DeWalt's kind of like, I don't like the Bosches. I've had a few Bosch sanders before. They didn't really have a ton of power to them. I know some people love them for dust collection, but I'd rather put a dust mask on and get the job done quicker than have to worry about that. So if you're just starting out, I would definitely say that DeWalt at around 80, 90 bucks is probably your best deal. However, this Festool has been incredible. Dust collection is as advertised. It's very smooth. It works very well. It's not very loud. All in all, I only own 2 Festool tools, this and a Domino, and I get it, okay? So getting into the 6 inch. This is the Bosch GET756. Now the biggest thing with this is that it has a turbo mode. Basically this was designed to compete with the Festool Rotex, okay? So what this is great for is 2 things. One, you can use it as a finish sander, but it is much heavier and it gets hot pretty quick. But it maintains that temperature and you can work with it through that. But where this really shines is removing material very quickly. Okay, and I didn't cover this before, but when you're using a random orbit sander, the last thing you want to do is you don't want to push into the material and you don't want to twist into the material. So reasons why you don't want to get impatient and start lifting your piece and sanding at an angle typically is, 1, it's going to leave really bad weird swirls and scratches, and 2, it's not good for your sander. You can actually mess up your bearings over time doing that on a regular basis. But with the Rotex, or turbo mode rather, it locks in direct drive and you can hammer on this thing as much as you want. Fair warning, if you have a smaller piece and you're going to attempt that, you want to have it held down really well because this thing will throw it. And it takes a little bit more upper body strength. That turbo mode is definitely not a joke. So, would I recommend the Rotex over this? Almost absolutely not. This is significantly cheaper than the Rotex. It's done fantastic for me. If you look at the reviews, they're great. So yeah, I would definitely say if you're going to go with a 6 inch, go with the Bosch. Now, those were both corded sanders. Now we're getting into cordless sanders. If you work on a job site, cordless sanders could be a benefit. If you work in a shop, don't buy them. Okay? Why do I say that? It's because, well, this sander right here. This is the Milwaukee 6 inch. This is the 3/16 stroke, which is a more aggressive stroke, M12 sander. Okay? I love this thing for about a minute. And then the battery starts to die. It gets a big drop off. And then it goes dead. I have like a dozen of these batteries. And I go through them like crazy. I did a full review on this sander. I want to love this sander, but it needs to have a cord on it. It's good for a job site, and that's about it, unfortunately. But it's just how lightweight it is, how aggressive it is. Even with the battery, it's really well balanced. It doesn't vibrate much. The dust collection is just as good as any other one. It would be a fantastic sander if they would put a cord in it. I cannot really recommend a battery sander to anyone in a shop. It just doesn't make sense. But the price tag of this one, I don't even know if I would recommend it to someone to take it on a job site. I'd say get the DeWalt 20 volt. I used to have the old 18 volt Milwaukee 5 inch. That thing was terrible. Absolutely don't recommend that thing at all. But yeah, this thing has kind of disappointed me. However, the more aggressive 3/16 stroke, which is how much this pad actually moves in relation to the sander, I've come to really love. And it kind of makes me want to buy the 6-inch Festool version of it. I don't know that number off the top of my head. So that may happen unless Milwaukee makes a corded version of this. The other thing that I can't stand is this paddle shifter here. It just forces you to put your hand in one spot, and I don't like it. I much prefer these switches. Moving on from there, let's go to the one cordless sander that I absolutely do love and would recommend, and that is this M12 detail sander. I did a full video on these two sanders as well, so I'm not going to get into a ton of conversation about it. But basically, this is one of those things. So this is a round surface. It cannot sand in the corners. This can sand in the corners. Simple as that. It can get in places where your normal sanders can't. It does a pretty good job. It does orbit, but it's not a random orbit sander, so it will throw some curlicues in there if you're not careful. But it has a ton of power. It lasts a pretty good long time. They make an interface pad so it's spongy, so it can kind of contour a little bit. This is something that I would actually really recommend you buy. This 3-inch is something that I absolutely would not recommend you buy. It has almost no power compared to this one. I understand that actually spinning it probably takes up a little more. It's very poorly balanced. Like I said, you need to be sanding flat. I know Festool makes some 3-inch sanders. I think they even make a 3-inch Rotex. I don't know. I don't necessarily think that this is a great sander for anyone unless you're on a job site. That's about the only time that I really use this thing. So in short, there you go. Those are the sanders that I actually use. Do you need to spend a ton of money on Festool or Mirka? I don't really think so. This is nice, but if I had to go back to the DeWalt, I wouldn't have any issue with that. I think that this is just as good as the Rotex for the money. I definitely want to spend the money on this. I think that you can get really good quality and specifically time savings out of these tools right here without spending, you know, $800–900 on a sander. This was about $250. I want to say I paid about $300 for this. I don't know what they cost these days. So yeah, those are the actual power sanders that I'm using in my shop. What about hand sanding? Okay, hand sanding is something that I try to completely avoid. About the only time you'll catch me hand sanding anything in the shop, it's because I can't use a power sander to do it, because time is money and I don't like to waste my time. What I started using a long time, because I've noticed if I have to do that, it's probably a curve or a contour, is that I have to actually use, well, I use originally these. These are the 3M Pro Pad sponge brushes. And as you can see, they contour very, very nicely. Now, there is a power sander. It is called a Surf Prep that uses this kind of spongy technique to get into these contours. I don't own it, but I will at some point. You can also buy 5 and 6 inch foam interface pads to go on your God, I can't talk. You can also buy 5 and 6 inch random orbital sander pads that are about 1/2 inch thick to give you a little bit of contour. They work okay, but I'll be honest with you, it no longer random orbits. I don't think that those are fantastic. So what I've switched to now that I do actually love are these pads here. As you can see, they're two-sided, and they're from Duragold. And Duragold is a company that I'm starting to fall in love with. They're pretty inexpensive. They actually last for a really long time. These things, you burn through them like that. I mean, they're super disposable. Like, I can get like a cabinet door and a half out of them. These things, they last a really long time without clogging up. They come in a bunch of different grits. You can even buy a variety pack, which is what I had bought. So as far as all of my hand sanding, this is all I use anymore. I don't use sanding blocks or anything like that, except for what we'll get to in the end here, like some really crazy contours. But yeah, so as far as my hand sanding goes, these are what I use. I get the variety packs. They come from 80 down to 320. Cannot recommend these enough. You can get them on Amazon. They're pretty affordable. So there you go. That's what you're going to use for hand sanding. Okay, let's discuss the big boy here. This is my Jet 2244 drum sander. It's got an open side, so that means that it can sand up to 22 inches wide, flip it, and hit the other side, so 44 inches. And I have to say, this thing is probably the most expensive tool I've bought in a long time. It's one of the bigger tools in my shop, something that I'm extremely excited to have. But here's what you need to know about drum sanders. Number one is they're not fast, okay? They take off tiny little bits at a time. It's not going to replace your planer. A lot of people buy them for end grain cutting boards and things like that that you can't put through a planer, and it's good for that. Sanding cross grain and things like that. It's not going to replace your planer. The other thing is, it's not going to replace all your other sanders. It's going to leave lines, okay? So when I first got this, I started off with 80 grit. I've since went to 120, but basically the 80 grit was leaving really deep lines. So what do I use this for? So frankly, I make a ton of cabinet doors. And cabinet doors are one of those things that I don't care how well I dial in my router table, I always get a little bit of unevenness on some of my doors. So the nice thing about this is it saves me hours of trying to hand sand all that out and feathering everything out so it looks flat. You just feed it through here. It takes me like 15 minutes to do 30 doors, and you got them sanded to 120 now. You're going to start at 120, and also they're perfectly flat. You don't get those weird divots because you focus on one spot too long. But basically, this controls the up and down. The head does not move. The belt, no, the head moves. Yeah, the head moves. I'm smart. That turns on the belt. As you can see, that's spinning there. I don't know if you can see it well or not. And then this turns on the conveyor. You have control over the speed of that. As you can see, it's not very loud. Is this necessary for every shop? Absolutely not. But I really want to take my business in the direction of building more custom built-ins, replacing more kitchen cabinet doors. I want to turn this into a cabinet shop. This is going to be an awesome tool for that. The other nice thing too is just like, say I get a little burning, say my table saw blade's a little bit dull, I can feed my pieces through here. It's only going to take off that tiny little bit, get rid of the burning. All in all, I'm really happy that I purchased this. Do I use this all day, every day? No. Will I use it more in the future? Absolutely. Was it worth $2,000? Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to say it was. So let's get into some of my secret weapons. So when I have to do hand sanding, like I said, it's because it's a weird contour or something like that. And again, we're back to the company, Duragold. You can get all this on Amazon. But these are some neat little things to kind of help you do some sanding. So for starters, the paper it comes with is hook and loop back, single side. Now one of them is, you get these little sticks right here. You attach your sandpaper like that. Now you can get into narrow crevices. Here you have, I use the crap out of this for raised panel doors, but now you can get into those crevices. You have a wedge you have to sand, there you go. There's probably like 12 of these shapes, and then on top of that, they all come with these little backed handles here. So, that's kind of one of my secret weapons. Anytime I got to do some of this fiddly stuff, that's typically where I go. And I don't see anyone talking about Duragold. They're a fantastic company. I 100% love them. So keep that one in mind there. Now, so we went over pretty much everything here. We went over sand and grit, what sandpaper to get, what sanders to get, maybe some things to stay away from, some things to buy. Listen, I just want to thank you guys for watching this video. If you got anything out of it, like, subscribe, do the things. Stick around because I got more coming. And in the meantime, go build shit. Thank you.